want to thank everyone for coming to our bookstore here at Adventures Unlimited. I see a bunch of familiar faces here and a lot of new ones too. That's great. Let me introduce myself. I'm David Hatcher Childress, and I'm actually the owner of this bookstore. And it's run by my mother, who's sort of really the owner in other ways. Ranny is her name. She's out over there. So you'll see her running around. And so, yeah, many of you probably have seen me on TV. I'm on this show called Ancient Aliens. And that is, in fact, that's apparently the most popular TV show on the History Channel now. And they're having 16 more episodes made. And in fact, just on Tuesday, they're coming here they're sending their crew to interview me, and then I'm going down to Honduras and Mexico to shoot. But the new episodes of Ancient Aliens should start airing in July and August, I guess they're saying. I'm the author myself of over 20 books, and I'm really known as an archaeologist. I write books on lost cities, including, this is one of my latest books called Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of the Southwest. And this book also has several chapters on the so-called Egyptians in the Grand Canyon. The Coast to Coast radio show talked about that a lot, and that came out of this book or my other book on lost cities of North and Central America. When I'm on the Ancient Aliens show, they usually credit with me as being the author of this book, and I am the author of it, Technology of the Gods. And this book's about 10 years old now, but the Ancient Aliens show has given it a big boost, and we reprint it several times a year now. And in fact, this book is in a dozen languages around the world. It's in Korean and Chinese, it's in Russian, it's in Polish and French and German, it's in Turkish, Greek and stuff like that. So this is perhaps the book I'm most well known for, although I've written so many. And what I'm going to be presenting today, actually, is from my latest book. This book came out about a year ago, and I haven't had a book come out since, called Yetis, SASQUATCH Hairy Giants. I've only done a few cryptozoology books. It's a little off my field, but I've always been fascinated with cryptozoology and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, living dinosaurs, giant snakes, and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, that's a lot of what's often in our magazine, World Explorer magazine. This is the latest issue here. And in fact, one of the big stories in here is called Quest for Skunk Apes and Swamp Boogers and stuff. So the magazine always has some kind of interesting cryptozoology stuff, and we have a crypto corner. One of our really popular issues, too, was all about giant snakes. I mean, we're talking 100-foot long super snakes in the Amazon and whatnot. So anyway, that said, I'm gonna stand back here behind the projector, and we will go into the strange world of Bigfoot and Yetis. All right, then. I first presented this actually in Kathmandu to the tourist board, and Yetis are really big in Nepal. And the Yeti's very much like is a Bigfoot. He's the abominable snowman. He's everywhere in Nepal and Kathmandu. Mozilla has the Yeti. There they have a Yeti Airlines, little kids' books. The Yetis supposedly, can be very friendly or something. However, I can tell you, this is from a Tintin book on Yetis and whatnot. In the Himalayas with the Sherpas and the Tibetans and stuff, to them, Yetis, which are very real, but to see a Yeti is very bad luck. It means you're going to die, actually, they think. So even though Yetis may want to party with you, they don't want to party with Yetis. That's what they say. And but well, yeah, when you're in the Himalayas and Tibet, Bhutan is also another area where the Yetis. In fact, there's a national park in Bhutan where. So what are the Yetis? I mean, and Bigfoot. A lot of people have surmised that they're the Gigantopithecus, that they're perhaps Neanderthal man, still alive. The wild men. I started my book by discussing the whole thing of the wild men of Europe, and these guys were more like ostracized outsiders, outcast, who had been essentially thrown out of the villages, and they are now living in the woods as kind of animals with skins and things like that. But as we'll see as we go along here, that even in Europe, they had incidences of Bigfoot and Yetis and what they call almas, which was the Mongolian word for them. The first chapter of the book, I went into giants, and I called the book Yetis, Sasquatch, and Hairy Giants, because Yeti and Bigfoot are giants themselves. So I thought some discussion of just giants in general would be good at the beginning of the book. And I've always been fascinated with the whole thing of giants and whatnot, and that could have really been an entire book in itself. All the stuff of people being 8, 9 feet tall. It's interesting too that we're often taught that people have been getting taller and that we're all taller than our grandparents and stuff like that. And for sure, for the last 100 years or so, people have been getting taller. But throughout history, in fact, people have been getting shorter. And people and our ancestors and stuff were a lot taller than us. Even Cro-Magnon man and Neanderthals and stuff, they were taller, they had bigger brains. And one of the reasons that people have been getting shorter is warfare. Mankind's favorite sport is war, and with wars like a big football team, you put all the big guys up front, and then they get killed. So in a sense, people are getting shorter because of wars and stuff. So here we go. Kathmandu is the capital of Nepal here. Over here is Bhutan. This would be the plateau of Tibet. You have the Himalayas running here. And what I had to explain again in Nepal was the idea that Yetis and the abominable snowman, do these guys really live up in the ice and snow? What's there to eat up there? And that's a big criticism of that, Yetis are fiction. One explanation that's been given for the legends of Yetis is that they're bears, and there is a Himalayan brown bear, and bears will occasionally stand up on 2 legs and walk. And in fact, they sometimes call a bear the animal that walks like a man. So the idea there is that people have essentially mistaken an encounter with a bear for a giant ape man, kind of thing. He's a Sasquatch, he's an abominable snowman, he's not a bear. And in fact, in Nepal, I was telling them too, I said, there's really 3 countries in the world where people are really fascinated with Yetis and Bigfoot. And those 3 countries are Nepal, the United States, and Canada. I mean, that's in the U.S. or Canada and in Nepal, it's a popular thing. Now, here's the other thing that I always like to explain about Yetis. This, in eastern Nepal areas, is what they call the Aran Valley, and it stretches right through here. And it starts really along the Tibetan-Nepalese border, and this is Sikkim right over here. And the 3rd highest mountain in the world is Mount Kanchenjunga, which is right there at the corner. And in fact, one of the names for Yetis, the abominable snowmen in this area, is Kanchenjunga demons. Kanchenjunga is also famous in the Theosophists of having weird tunnels. The idea of Shangri-La or Shambhala or something being inside the mountain. This area has a lot of strange legends and stuff. And what comes out of this area was what's called the Aran Valley. Now, the Aran Valley is a very deep river valley, and it's literally a tropical jungle there. So when you're in the area of the Aran Valley, you can be in ice and snow at a high pass, but in that same day you can drop down into deep jungle, and where monkeys and stuff live, where it never snows, where there's tons of stuff to eat. I mean, it's a jungle. But just a few miles away are glaciers and icy passes. And this is the area where particularly Yetis are known to live in this area. And Yetis, they have to eat things. They need to eat, they like bears and stuff. They eat bark off trees, they eat berries and things. They do eat meat. They'll turn over boulders, giant boulders in streams and rivers where there'll be frogs and stuff underneath, and they'll eat those. Some of the early footprints and stuff of Yetis, like Bigfoot, were found in the Himalayas. At that time, right after World War II, there was this big rush to the Himalayas to be the first to conquer Mount Everest. And the British basically were the first climbing team to get up there. This is one of the most famous photos in the world of taken by a British climber named Eric Shipton, 1950, crossing a pass. Also in the 50s, particularly in Britain and America, the whole thing of the Abominable Snowman was big. They started making some movies. This is an old Hammer black and white 50s movie. In this movie, at the end, the Yetis are these wise, sort of mystical masters or something like that in the Himalayas. Sanderson, one of my heroes, he was always into unusual things, the unexplained. He was a cryptozoologist. He became interested in UFOs. He's really the one who also brought out stories like the Philadelphia experiment. And he wrote a famous book, too, called Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life. He died in 1972. He was part of British intelligence, too. When one of his friends was Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond books. And in fact, one of the stories of Ian Fleming, who died in the early 60s, just as they started to make the James Bond movies, and Ivan T. Sanderson, they had both been in British intelligence together, and Ian Fleming lived in Jamaica in his estate called Goldeneye. And Ivan T. Sanderson wanted Fleming to come to New Jersey where he lived, and he was going to show him all these documents about the Philadelphia experiment and the whole thing of like teleporting this battleship and making it invisible and whatnot. And Ivan T. Sanderson had been gathering all this unusual information on it. And Ian Fleming was just getting ready to fly to New York, go to New Jersey to visit Ivan T. Sanderson about it when Ian Fleming suddenly had a heart attack and died. And he was drinking one of his martinis or something and bang, keeled over on his desk. And it's thought by some people that he was murdered because of that, because British intelligence didn't want Ian Fleming to come and meet with Ivan T. Sanderson. Back to the Himalayas and whatnot. Part of the stories with Kanzanzanga and with many Yeti stories that, yeah, the Yetis are coming from these secret valleys, Shangri-La, Shambhala, hidden valley, hidden kingdom of the masters and yogis and stuff like that. And certainly in Nepal and Tibet, you do hear stories like that. The whole idea of Yetis coming into your tent or something like that. The most famous story, these are some Yeti hands that were supposedly taken in China, exactly where these are right now. One of the famous stories that comes out of 1972 in Nepal, and it was a female Sherpani yak herder was at a remote pasture near Mount Everest, actually, when this Yeti came, like a white-haired Yeti, and in front of her, what he did was he would grab these yaks and he'd twist them, and he would break the necks of these yaks, and then he would take a big rock and smash their skulls in and eat their brains. And for a Yeti to actually come, down into what would be sort of, a populated area where humans would live was unusual anyway. So it's almost like this Yeti was old and dying, and he was craving vitamins and minerals or something, and that's why so he would kill these yaks and then eat their brains. The girl who witnessed all this went into a traumatic shock, and this is a famous story in Nepal in the 70s, though they've largely forgotten it. But she was like struck dumb from this witnessing this Yeti, and the Yeti didn't bother her at all. But it went and systematically killed like 10 yaks in this herd. And it's so strong, can grab them by the horns, and yaks are big, and just break their neck. So that even today, that's still a famous story in Nepal. There's only really one known photo of a Yeti, and it's this one here. This is supposedly a photo taken of a Yeti by a British mountaineer guy. His name was Anthony Wooldridge. It was 1986. And he was crossing a snowfield, and as he looked back, he saw this figure there in the lower right, and he took a photo. And so this is known as the Anthony Wooldridge photo. So it's thought to be the only real photo of a Yeti. When it comes to Bigfoot and Sasquatch in the United States, there are a lot of photos, and we'll see those in a minute. This is another supposed photo of a Yeti called the Snowwalker photo. It's thought this is a hoax. This was actually aired on a Fox show in the 90s about unexplained mysteries, and suddenly this footage showed up in a video. They call it the Snowwalker. When you're in the Everest area, there's a village called Kumjung, and I've been there a number of times, and there's a monastery there, and at that monastery, which is right here, the Kumjung Monastery, it's a Buddhist Tibetan monastery, and inside it is the scalp of a Yeti. You can go in there and see it. It's kept in this box. It's a pointed head. It's got like a brown-red fur and stuff on it. It's only the very top of the head. There's no ears or eyes or any other features, but it's this conical head. They've done some testing with it, but back in the 50s, they tested it, and they were inconclusive on what it was. Some people say that the Tibetan monks there were creating a Yeti scalp out of like a mountain goat kind of a thing, but of course they say that it's real. There's a hand too, that we'll look at that in a minute. But so here we have India, Sikkim, but all through this area, and this is Kashmir up here, all this area, and even up into Pakistan, it's the Himalayan range and the Karakoram range. And Yetis and abominable snowmen like that are reported all through this area. Bhutan, which is the country just east of Nepal, they call the Yeti there the Migoi, and there's a lot of different stories of Yetis, and they've created stamps, including a 3D stamp. So, according to the Bhutanese government, yeah, I mean, they have these things there. They even recognize them. There's even a park in eastern Bhutan where Yetis are, it's like a preserve. And in fact, the latest evidence that's coming out about Yetis and the Migoi in this area is British researchers have been trying to get hair samples, and they have them now, from a tree that's in this park. And this Yeti would go there, and they put traps for him. And a guy in Illinois told me this same kind of a idea. He said, what you try and do is, it's like a raccoon trap where you put nails on a tree or something, and you put like say a chicken or something in there. And the whole idea is to try and get like the Bigfoot or something will get in there and grab the chicken or something to eat, but he scratches himself on a nail. And you make it so that he has to sort of cut himself or scratch himself just to get a little bit of blood. You get some hair off him and stuff like that, and then that can be tested. And the British are especially interested in doing that. And they have a bunch of programs. They're also running around Sumatra and Malaysia. So this is a map of Bhutan. It's a little bit hard to see it, but this area of Bhutan over here, way in the east, and Bhutan is a country with hardly any roads or anything. I mean, you need like jeeps and stuff just to go anywhere. But this area over here is this national park, and it is particularly known as a habitat of Yetis. Bhutan, too, is like very forested. It's a super kind of mountain jungle kind of a country. One of the big stories, too, in Bhutan, they have many legends and things of Yetis. One is of this archer who does manage to kill a Yeti. And as I was saying earlier, with them, with the Sherpas and the Tibetans and the Bhutanese, any encounter with a Yeti is bad luck. It's a bad omen. I mean, you don't even want to talk about it. And so that's like, if you get those guys around, particularly anyone who've ever had any encounters with Yetis and stuff, they don't want to talk about it. It's bad luck to even be talking about Yetis and abominable snowmen. And they think that if they ever meet one, they'll die. It's like an omen. You're going to die now. The whole idea, too, that the Yeti is some mystical, interdimensional creature who can, and there are beliefs like this, and with Bigfoot, too, that they can actually appear and disappear at will. In the United States, there are stories of people allegedly seeing Bigfoot come out of a flying saucer or something, and so that there's some kind of association with UFOs and Bigfoot and Yetis or something. Although many other people say, look, and people that I've interviewed and have had encounters, I mean, they've basically told me generally that it's an animal. It's like a gorilla. It's a giant ape man. They have to eat food, and then they shit in the woods and all that kind of stuff. Just like a bear, like a human. This is another Yeti scalp and a hand, and these were at the Pangboche Monastery in Nepal, which is near Mount Everest. These are missing now. They were stolen. We have photos of them from the 50s and 60s and 70s, but at some point in the late 70s or something, somebody stole these artifacts, and we don't know where they are right now. There's a story, too, that one of the fingers on this hand was taken by the famous Yeti hunter whose name was Tom Slick. And he was an oil millionaire guy from Texas, and he was a Yeti hunter and a Bigfoot hunter in the 50s. He died in a mysterious plane crash in Montana in 1959, and his plane exploded in like the sky. And some people think it was sabotage, and he was murdered for some reason. But that's kind of what he did, was run around the world, and he was this millionaire guy he looked for the Loch Ness Monster too, but Yetis and whatnot. But he was friends with Jimmy Stewart, and he wanted to have one of the fingers of this hand tested. So he brought it to Calcutta, where Jimmy Stewart was with his wife, and then supposedly Jimmy Stewart's wife smuggled this Yeti finger out in her underwear. How's that? So, and then it was like tested in Britain, and it was eventually returned, but now it's stolen. So the whole idea, there are in fact Yeti artifacts, Yeti hands, Yeti scalps, and things like that. Supposedly in Tibet, in one monastery, and as I report in my book, there were rumors of an entire mummified Yeti, but we've never found out where that was or a picture of it. This is a Mexican stamp of the Yeti. Now, one of the interesting things, too, was what they called the Minnesota Iceman. And this guy, Ivan T. Sanderson, got in on this. And this is a very strange story, and there's good photos of this. In 1968, for a few months, 69, in Wisconsin and Minnesota, this frozen Bigfoot was exhibited in a block of ice at state fairs and stuff. And it went on for about a year. And here's a photo of it. And it was literally some giant ape man frozen there. He had been shot through one of his eyes. And the bullet went out the back of his head. Ivan T. Sanderson and a Belgian cryptozoologist who's very famous named Bernard Heuvelmans went to examine it. This is basically what he looked like. He'd been shot through one eye. He was totally naked. There were testicles and a penis that could be seen. This is what he looked like. His hand was coming over. And what happened to this is really a strange story. Because it had been shot, and it'd been shot through the eye, the FBI decided to investigate it, to find out, whether this was real, who had killed it, why it had been shot, who had shot it. So as the FBI was going to investigate this, it vanished, and it just disappeared. And then it reappeared briefly with, which was obviously a fake. I mean, because and then suddenly, also in ice, but it was just some Hollywood dummy. And they never knew who the owner of this thing was. It was supposedly some very wealthy guy in Los Angeles. But the Minnesota Iceman is apparently, and Ivan T. Sanderson thought this, the real deal. It was, a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, in ice. And it was right there, and they were able to examine it. They could see hair follicles and everything on it. Now, here's the interesting story about this. They exhibit it as a sort of North American Sasquatch Bigfoot, but it's now thought that this actually came from Vietnam and was shot during the Vietnam War. And that it was loaded, and that an American GI had shot this. And there's an area of Vietnam, too, near the Cambodian border, that's also this wild mountain forest area, and it's known to have the Vietnamese version of Yetis and Bigfoot. So it's thought that this was shot by some guy in the army, was loaded onto a helicopter, and then brought back to the U.S. somehow, and then this guy in Los Angeles got it, and then it was exhibited. So they thought it was, like a real thing. Here's another interesting story along these lines, as long as we're talking about, military being involved and somebody shooting a Bigfoot. After I wrote the book, somebody sent me, this was maybe just 9 months ago, to an online chat thing that was pretty curious, and I hadn't read about it before. And here's what the claim was in that, was when Mount St. Helens went off in 1980, right, was that, and when Mount St. Helens blew up, one of the things that happened was what they call a pyroclastic flow came down the mountain. There's just hot gases, super hot, flow down the mountain, and it incinerated all these forests and all the animals in it. And deer and moose and whatever, bears were just, fried and burnt to death. And it's just super hot gases. It's like instantaneous. And that then later, during this cleanup, this guy claimed that the military was there and that they were taking all these dead bodies of animals, and it included some Bigfoot. And this guy claimed that he witnessed a Bigfoot, a dead Bigfoot, burned as well, being put into a helicopter and flown out. Now, if that's the case, and it's totally just a rumor, but if that's the case, it's kind of interesting because the military would want to get their hands on a Bigfoot, I would think, and they can get their DNA. I mean, with the technology you have right now, if you had a dead Bigfoot, you would be able to clone it. You could bring it back to life. You could have, God knows what they do in their military, genetic labs and stuff. But yeah, they could really do something with Bigfoot DNA, and maybe are. And that might be the answer to some of the weird stories of Bigfoot and flying saucers and stuff. We don't know. So let's go ahead. This is another interesting photo. It's a rare one. It's in the book. and the Yeti de Bourganeuf. And it was similar to the Minnesota Iceman in that this was a dead almas. It supposedly came out of Mongolia through East Germany, and then it was exhibited for very briefly in France at a town in France called Bourganeuf. And this town too was having like a kind of a state fair kind of a thing, like as the Minnesota Iceman was exhibited. And this dead Yeti that was also apparently frozen, almost was briefly exhibited there. It then vanished afterwards. But there are a few photos of it. And in fact, and this is the last photo, it's almost, he looks kind of like the Wookiee in the Star Wars movie, too. And so these things can even fly spaceships, you know, and I guess. Fortunately, they're on the side of the Force. So. All right. So, and of course, it's easy to make fun of Bigfoot and hairy giants and Yetis and my 8 hours of hell with Bigfoot. It's always tough when, you know, you get together with Bigfoot. Bigfoot doesn't like bikers really either. So different pop ideas of Bigfoot and whatnot. This is from the Abominable Snowman with Forrest Tucker, who was the star of F Troop, if you remember that old TV show. Okay, this is Sir Edmund Hillary. He was the first guy who climbed Mount Everest with the Sherpa Tenzing Norgay. He early on in the 50s got involved in some Yeti hunts with Marlon Perkins of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And that had to do with the St. Louis Zoo, sponsored it. They even had a Yeti gun and stuff like that to go finding Yetis. This is Tom Slick. In the movie, The Abominable Snowman, Forrest Tucker plays Tom Slick. I mean, he's clearly Tom Slick in this movie. And here's Forrest Tucker up here. So here we go. This is just kind of a news clipping from the time. Texas Oil Man is after the Snowman. He was a kind of like a Howard Hughes character, where his father had, become very, very rich, and so he was now a rich kid who basically could spend his money going around the world searching for abominable snowmen and monsters and things like that. Peter Byrne was a South African British guy who did some of the early exploration with Tom Slick. He's still alive and lives in either in Oregon or Washington State, and he still runs a Bigfoot research center up there. And even today, although he's a pretty old guy now, he's considered one of the old experts. This is the Pangboshi hand. This is the one that's disappeared now. The finger that was taken off by Tom Slick, and then Jimmy Stewart's wife smuggled it out. This is a guy, he's very famous in Japan, Takahashi. He's the sort of #1 Yeti hunter out of Japan, and he's very famous in Japan. He comes to Nepal every year and goes searching for Yetis, mainly in the Annapurna area. And he's found Yeti footprints, like these ones here in the Annapurna area, which is kind of central Nepal right there. More of some of his photos. And now, also crossing from what they call Makalu base camp area. Makalu is a peak that's between Mount Everest and Kanzenzunga, and that's where some of the earliest Yeti footprints have been found, and that is in the Aran Valley type area. And these were some footprints taken by a Sherpa named Ong Pemba in 2007, and he had a poster in his lodge. This is what they call Gigantopithecus. This is a type of giant super ape. We have fossils and teeth of these guys. They lived, we know they were still alive till about 10,000 years ago or so. So this is one of the candidates for what they think Bigfoot, Yeti, and Sasquatch could be is this type of supposedly extinct giant ape. And these things were 8, 9 feet tall. This is a Chinese drawing of what Gigantopithecus supposedly looked like, very much like with the classic descriptions of a Yeti or Bigfoot or something like that. There's a bar in Kathmandu too called the Rum Doodle, and throughout the whole bar is all of this Yeti, Bigfoot stuff, including this. Bigfoot killed on Mount Everest, you know, how about that? Well, you know, Bigfoot pulled me off an icy ledge and saved my life. So you never know if Bigfoot's gonna, you know, kill you or, you know, save your life. That's that. Or he might make you his love slave, too. There is one of the famous stories in Nepal from the 1920s is of a Sherpa woman, a young girl, who was kidnapped by a Yeti and kept captive for a couple of years in a cave. She eventually had a child with this Yeti. There's a story in Bhutan. There's a story up in Canada of an old story of a guy also being sort of kidnapped by a Yeti family. And he was to be, the family sort of wanted this guy to marry his daughter kind of thing, you know. So he stayed with him for like 2 days and then escaped. That's one of the famous stories. But then the whole idea of, yeah, Bigfoot coming out of flying saucers, you know, is he just some crazy hungry animal, or is he some interdimensional kind of thing? The Bigfoot diet, there, you can, it might work for you. It worked for Bigfoot. You never want Bigfoot to escape, you know, from the military compound where they're trying to, you know, get his DNA or something. Even Hillary somehow involved with Bigfoot. I don't know. Hillary names Bigfoot as her running mate. There you go. That was. So it's fun to make fun of Bigfoot, and apparently he doesn't care. You know, he's got a good sense of humor. So the most famous footage and photos of Bigfoot is what's called the Bluff Creek, California footage. This was 16 millimeter footage. It's of a female Bigfoot walking. She was coming across a creek. It's pretty interesting to watch. She's walking, swinging her arms. It's very clear footage. She turns and looks at the camera. There's breasts on her, and there's one of the photos in the frame. This is the guy, Roger Patterson. He's the one who took the footage. He is deceased now. I met him in Durango, Colorado, back in the '60s when he came to our high school. But he's probably, you know, he was definitely the big Bigfoot hunter of the '60s, and the most famous one for having taken the footage. Now, this is a frame from the Bluff Creek footage, and it's a really interesting one because you see the bottom of the foot here. And, I mean, this footage is so utterly crystal clear that it's either real or it has to be a hoax. I mean, you know, but and that's what other people will say. They'll say, well, this is a guy in a gorilla suit trying to be a female Bigfoot. Yeah, but yeah, this photo and actually that footprint is that the foot there is very telltale, and it's unlikely really that anybody in a costume would have created that. There's whole books written about just these photos, and both pro and con, and actually a lot of lawsuits. They made quite a bit of money off these photos too. That's it. But so here we go. These are some of the, you know, certainly the most famous photos of Bigfoot that have ever been taken. So here we go, some more. And this was an area where a new logging road had been cut in. What'll happen too is that in Northern California and parts of Oregon and Washington and stuff, of course British Columbia, but yeah, they'll be making a new logging road to go into some mountain area. And then it's like when they come back, and these roads are only now a few weeks old or a few months old, but they'll suddenly start seeing these footprints, you know, in the mud along the logging road. And it's Bigfoot kind of coming down saying, whoa, what's going on here, and this is like a super blow up of the face and stuff like that. Um, Now, a guy sent me this photo, a guy in Colorado named Joe Feck, and he claimed that he said this is the oldest Bigfoot photo ever taken. It was taken in the 40s by some guy, and he'd gone into his collection. But yeah, this is supposedly Bigfoot, and it's kind of fuzzy and stuff. But and I'm not sure where this was taken. Somewhere here, in the Pacific Northwest or something, and. This guy had even some kind of relationship with Bigfoot in a sense. You'll find too that as you get into the stories of Bigfoot that a lot of the people who seem to have encounters with skunk apes and Bigfoot, and we'll get into skunk apes too here, that a lot of times it's women who get really close up because Bigfoot is more curious about women and he's less afraid of them, and so whenever Bigfoot encounters a man, he like takes off immediately. But with women, he'll stop and stare at them and check them out, just like normal guys. Yeah. So this photo here is kind of a famous one too. This was taken in Oregon. It's a pretty good photo. It's supposedly taken by a ranger there. He took 2 photos, and it's such a good photo, you almost have to wonder if it's a hoax. Certainly people, skeptics would think, yeah, this is a hoax photo, somehow photoshopped. It almost looks like a kind of Frazetta painting or something like that. But this appeared in the sort of mid-90s in a few magazines and stuff. This is also a pretty good photo too, and a weird one. This photo appeared around the year 2000. It's supposedly taken up in northern Idaho by an automatic camera, and right near the Canadian border. And in fact, the story with this Bigfoot, and he's a weird-looking one, is that he was eating bark off a tree. But there was this automatic camera that was to capture wildlife, and it supposedly came up with this very unusual, weird photo. And all these photos are in my book. This is also an automatic camera photo, and this appeared in our magazine a couple of years ago. This was taken like 2009 and this was a guy too. You can, from National Geographic now and other places, you can now buy these wildlife auto photo things, and you can set them up in your backyard or on a nature trail. And the story is here in Kentucky, he had bought a camera like this, put it at the edge of, he lived in the back of this woods, and he thought he was going to get some photos of raccoons and stuff like that. And then when he developed his photo, there was this gorilla, in his backyard. And he took it to the wildlife people and he said, "What is this a photo of?" And they said, "Well, it looks like you got a gorilla in your backyard." And he said, "Yeah, doesn't it? Well, but, is it a Bigfoot and stuff?" And they said, "Oh, well, can't be. Oh, Bigfoot doesn't exist, so it must be something else." So here's some other, as I did my research and stuff, this is also a photo of, supposedly of a skunk ape. This is like down south in Georgia or something. A lot of these photos, and it's kind of what I was talking about, how people are reluctant to claim that they've seen Bigfoot, and they're reluctant to tell people they have photos of Bigfoot. So they do it anonymously, and they'll put up a photo online or something like that, and or send it to somebody, and eventually it gets up. But the bad part is that they become sort of unaccredited photos, and you don't even know when they were taken or by whom, and even the person who took it doesn't even want to tell you they took it. So this is another one from the Everglades. Florida does have a lot of skunk ape stories. Here's one from July 8th, 2000. This is also some skunk ape running around Florida or Alabama or something. This was kind of a strange photo too, where we'll see in a minute a close-up, but this guy just took a picture of his friends or something off-roading here, but then sitting right here, yeah, in his photo was some kind of, ape critter there. And that's the thing, if you're in Africa and you get a picture of some ape or something, you're like, well, okay, we got chimpanzees here and stuff, but they're not supposed to be here in North America. And in fact, some Bigfoot books and stuff they say, big North America's great ape, kind of a thing. All right, this was another one, and I found this guy actually, after I published in the book, this guy wrote to me, and so I found out who had taken this one eventually. Like the guy sort of finally said, yeah, I'm the one who took these photos. So this guy was on Mount St. Helens, and November 17, 2005, and he looked over at this hill where he was, and he saw this thing, and he thought it was a stump of a tree, but then it suddenly stood up and walked away, and he realized, whoa, I've been sitting here staring at a Bigfoot all day, and he took these photos, and this guy is up in the ice and snow, so this was this one, fairly recent photo, so he's kind of a North American abominable snowman guy. This is another called the so-called Brent's Cam pic. This is also another automatic camera photo, supposedly, of Bigfoot here. A couple other Bigfoot pics. The Jeffrey Gonzalez pic, where this is Bigfoot over here standing by some stump or something. The Kedrowski photo of Bigfoot. So, and it's clearly something's going on here. So now you either have your hoaxers in the gorilla suits trying to be Bigfoot, or you've got the real deal. And then you have you can have Photoshop fakes and stuff too, of course. The Country Cupboard in Texas is a cafe in East Texas where they also have a lot of Bigfoot sightings and stuff. And a guy came into the cafe, and it's a real, like remote sort of rural country cafe down some, forest highway or something. And he just came into this cafe and said, hey, I've seen Bigfoot, and I got some photos of them. Here they are. And he gave them to the cafe, and then he left. And so they have these up on the wall. Sort of like somebody going into the little alien and Rachel or something, and giving them a UFO photo, and these are the aliens I saw here, But so that anyway, this is kind of a famous photo. All right, this is the Florida skunk ape, what's also known as the Miyaka skunk ape. So this story with this was that this woman, and again, it's interesting that it's a woman, because she lived in this house near Fort Myers, Florida, and lived on the edge of this national park, and she had bushels of apples in her backyard, right? And she lived right up against this forest. And this skunk ape would come out of the woods and was stealing apples from her, this bushel of apples she had. And she just got tired of it, and it wouldn't run away. And then she took photos. She took 2 photos of it. This one, and then, yeah, there are 2 different photos. And then she sent them to the police station there in Miyaka and said, hey, this skunk ape's stealing my apples. And the police had to go to her house and, check it out and all that. So, yeah, the police do get involved in a lot of Bigfoot stories. And in fact, that's a famous one here in Arizona, where Bigfoot was investigated by the police up at the White Mountain Apache Reservation. So these are pretty famous photos, actually, and were released actually by the police department there in Miyaka. So the Florida skunk ape. There we go. Another one. More skunk ape photos from the internet. The most famous story of the whole in the South is the story of Boggy Creek, and the whole Boggy Creek was a story which is known as the Falk River Monster, really. And it's an area of Arkansas called the Falk River and Swamp. And then in the movie, they called it Boggy Creek. But the story is here again of and if you ever see the movie, which you can get on DVD or video, what happens there is that this family lived in a cabin pretty remote near this creek, and there was a big swamp in the back. And there was a couple of teenage girls who were in this family, and they were often in this cabin by themselves. And this Bigfoot would start coming by this cabin in the middle of the night when the girls were there. And he was like a peeping Tom, and he would look in the windows, and he was, I mean, they felt he was genuinely after these girls. And he tried to break in. And in the movie, you know, it gets pretty scary where Bigfoot's literally, you know, kicking in the door kind of thing, you know, trying to get into their cabin and stuff. So that's the whole Boggy Creek Bigfoot story, and it's a real story. Arizona's got its Bigfoot too, supposedly. This is a photo off the internet. It's not a very good one, but it's supposed to show a Bigfoot carrying a baby Bigfoot. And it's actually kind of like near Sedona, or it's Mogollon Rim or something. And in fact, there's what they call the Mogollon monster. Here's the close-up. It's hard to really see on this, but yeah, but this was taken somewhere around here. There were also Bigfoot sightings in Page Springs, you know, between here and, well, Cornville or whatever. Not too far from where John and Cindy McCain had got their little house or something. Yeah, Bigfoot's been seen around there, supposedly. Not sure why. And then there's the famous White Mountain reservations. But yeah, Bigfoot is around here. He's around Sedona, he's around Flagstaff, he's around Pine and Strawberry and Payson, stuff like that. Another guy in the 70s, his name was Ivan Marks. He was a famous Bigfoot hunter. He became famous largely for doing a bunch of hoaxes. And he also did a movie called The Legend of Bigfoot. You can get that. It's kind of a funny movie to watch because this guy is sort of like wherever he goes, you know, there's Bigfoot sort of thing, which doesn't seem to be. But he took a lot of photos, including Bigfoot washing himself in a creek and stuff. But his photos are pretty suspect, and they're generally thought to be hoax photos. But he was involved in a very real Bigfoot case early on, known as the Bossberg Cripple incident, which was a footprint, really. But it was a footprint of that was like of a crippled Bigfoot, and one of the foots was all deformed. So that made it an unusual footprint because one foot was normal, but the other foot had this weird, it was almost like a club foot. So then they were wondering, like, well, who would try and fake that, you know, some crippled Bigfoot and stuff. So, and in fact, the footprints of Bigfoot are really the best evidence we have. And even though people would say, the skeptics would say, oh yeah, it's just, you know, again, hoaxers. But yeah, most Bigfoot real footprints can't be really hoaxed. This is the Oregon Bigfoot video. This is quite recent. You can watch this on YouTube as well. These guys are going up this river, and they're filming it like from a boat behind. And suddenly this island on the river, and right over here, yeah, they captured what was this giant, hairy ape-man guy sort of trying to get out of the way and moving to the left of the scene. And these are frames from the video. And this is supposedly what it looked like. This is all pretty new. So if you head down south sometime, you might want to go to a skunk ape festival. And this is the Miyaka skunk ape photos again. And these are really good photos. It looks like an orangutan or some kind of what they call a great ape. Yeah, I mean, you have to think with these photos, the Miyaka State Forest, and this whole thing was right around this area of Florida, right here, and around St. Petersburg, all this whole sort of west coast area, and then of course you have all the Everglades and stuff like that. But just to look at the Miyaka skunk ape photo again, I mean, either this is something escaped from a circus, you know, and that is an explanation they sometimes give for Bigfoot and skunk ape type photos and stuff, is that, yeah, you know, some chimpanzee or orangutan or gorilla escaped from the circus, now he's running around Florida, you know, stuff like that. All right, so the Miyaka skunk ape. Swamp Thing, they live in the swamp. Swamp Thing had his own TV series for a while, so they get publicity. This is a swamp ape, Bigfoot cast. So this is. They think that swamp apes and skunk apes and swamp boogers are smaller, and they're more like human-sized, even smaller. I mean, they can range from 5 feet to 6 feet, maybe 7. I mean, this guy's big. Uh, but other Bigfoot, and particularly ones of the Pacific Northwest, I mean, they're 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet tall, and even ones in the on the East Coast and stuff. I mean, they are big, and they can swim. This is like an idea of the difference between a swamp ape or swamp booger and a real Sasquatch, just slightly different facial features. They are a little bit smaller, supposedly. Here we are, drawing of what some people think of as a skunk ape or swamp booger kind of thing down south. This is a recent photo. This just in the last few months. It's also allegedly taken by one of these robotic cameras. This is thought to be a hoax, actually, this photo. And, now with Photoshop and all the computer software, it's easier to fake photos and whatnot. But this guy, Tim Peeler, he is a guy in North Carolina. This happened on June 5th. And this was big news on CNN, and it was on Fox. It was on all the news things. This guy, he lived up on this mountain in North Carolina, and he claimed that this 10-foot tall, white-haired Bigfoot with 6 fingers on each hand was coming to his cabin and was trying to get his dogs. And then he claimed that he went out, and he confronted Bigfoot and hey, you get out of here, leave my dogs alone. And then he called the police, and the police came, and it became national news for a couple of days. And then the police, too, got involved in the national news, interviewed them. The police said, yeah, we've had Bigfoot reports up here before. But this guy, was like totally adamant about what he saw, what it was. This Bigfoot, he didn't have a camera or anything. So anyway, these are some drawings of what skunk apes supposedly look like. Here we are. This is some archaeologist guy interviewing a skunk ape down south. But anyway, the difference between skunk apes and Bigfoot. You can even get a silver coin of Florida skunk ape put with your Krugerrands and everything if you want. So, all right, these can come out. And of course, eventually they're going to find a skeleton. One of the things that people often ask me about, or as skeptics with Bigfoot, is, and it's a good question. It's the question that people should ask. They say, well, why don't we just find dead Bigfoot out in the forest? Why aren't some hikers walking down the trail and there's a dead Bigfoot? Why, wouldn't we have that? Why does that never happen? You would think it would. If Bigfoot was real, people would see dead Bigfoot, And that's a good question, and one, I have to answer it. And here's the answer. And I've spent a lot of time hiking all over the place and camping and whatnot. And I don't know, have you ever walked down the trail and found a dead bear on the trail? Have you ever walked down the trail and found a dead mountain lion lying there? I mean, no, you're not ever going to see that. You're never going to walk down the trail and find a dead bear. You're never going to walk down the trail and find a dead mountain lion. But they're out there. We know that. I mean, there's not some mystery that they exist. It's the same thing with cougars, too, actually. Like if you go to England, in England it's a big thing of these big cats. And they're seen in England every once in a while. Some big, like a cougar or type of lion or something jumps across a road. And they don't have big cats in England. So, they're saying, well, these must be, they're interdimensional, jumping in and out. But I would, and I would be with my British friends and I would say, look, we have big cats in America, but you never will see one. I mean, it'd be rare. People do occasionally see a mountain lion or something, but it's not very common. But it's that kind of a thing. You're just not going to be walking down a trail and find a dead bear and for that matter, a Bigfoot. And even if it's some big, and Bigfoot did die of old age or something like that, he probably isn't going to just flop over on the trail, you know. I mean, I don't know. But, you know, in theory, yeah, to have Bigfoot, there has to be a breeding population. Yeah, there have to be mommy and daddy Bigfoots. There have to be baby Bigfoots. The old Bigfoots get dead. And in fact, some of these Bigfoots that are seen as white Bigfoots, and that's something that as I was doing the book, became really interested in, that some Bigfoots, also like Yetis supposedly, they are white-haired. And it seems like they're old Bigfoots. They're, you know, have got gray hair, and some of these Bigfoots kind of, for some reason, they get driven out of their clan or something, and they go dumpster diving, and they end up closer to civilization, and then people see them because, yeah, most Bigfoot, I mean, they are so super duper shy that, yeah, they hear and smell and see you coming a long way away, and they leave. I mean, that's more or less the whole Bigfoot story. So this is the last little slide I have here, and in fact, this is taken up on the Zuni reservation with a friend who's here, actually, Clifford. Oh, he's sitting right here, and yeah, Clifford showed us this, but this is a petroglyph in a canyon up on Zuni. Clifford's right here. Clifford, what do you call this thing? It's sort of a name for this?
Well, in Zuni we call it Welba, which means Bigfoot. And it's right there where the canyon where the clan system and Zunis originated or designated. And it's, later on, when I did more research on that there's a cave in there that is hidden by some shrubbery, which I later on found out from some of the historian folks over there. So it's right in that same canyon where he's got his own cave in there.
Yeah, it's like a secret canyon too. You'd need a guide to take you in there and show you that. All right, well that really concludes my presentation, and you can get my book. Thanks very much.